News! Okay, we'll start with this. Veteran boxing scribe Francisco A. Salazar said, "Looks like the February 6th card is moving to Saturday, February 14th. A fight I'm being told was discussed for the TKO boxing card on January 30th is former WBC light heavyweight champion Alexander Vazdik versus Radavalle Hot Rod Kalajdzic. This is very fluid." More familiar names. Vazdik, Hot Rod. These are fighters that you've seen before on other shows. Familiar names and serviceable fighters that will now service as content for Zuffa's first couple of shows. They've got about 3 on schedule. The outspoken and world-traveled Mr. Pull-Up said, "As per the Nevada State Athletic Commission, it looks like Zuffa has more scheduled dates than both PBC, Top Rank, and Golden Boy combined." Mr. Pull-Up continued, "Keep cheerleading for no scheduled dates from PBC, Top Rank, Golden Boy Promotions, while Zuffa is getting busy because they have an actual budget from an actual outlet." What is it that Mr. Pull-Up was addressing? The critics, the naysayers, those folks who don't want Dana White and his way of doing business entering into the boxing space, even though already Zuffa seems on more stable ground than the established game in town. Long-standing promoters, guys with a lot of time in, a lot of experience. Was just the other day that Ariel Helwani and Ade Oladipo were saying that they felt Zuffa's launch was underwhelming. They were expecting more. Bit more grandstanding, whereas what I'm seeing from Zuffa is already encouraging, that they have 3 separate dates on schedule, 3 separate shows, which is more than we can say for a lot of people. So what we're seeing is that Zuffa will have some familiar faces and names upon their launch. Familiarity is important. And a string of shows to launch the promotion, which also communicates consistency. You need to be able to put on boxing matches consistently. And overall, not that much to have to contend with. Not that much to have to compete with. You don't really have to compete with PBC as they have nothing on schedule. Top Rank still doesn't have a broadcast partner and only 1 fight on schedule. Golden Boy, they may have 2 or 3 fights on schedule, many of which are behind a paywall and are said to be on shaky ground, as their DAZN deal could be ending this year, making Zuffa's biggest competitor Matchroom, that's operating on a completely different wavelength that likely won't even affect what Zuffa is trying to do. They're not going head-to-head. You could look at Matchroom as being the big leagues with many of the big names in the big-time boxing matches, whereas Zuffa is a little bit more modest, at least right now, though still affordable. To watch Matchroom's fights and Queensbury's and really anything else on the DAZN platform, it will run you approximately $29.99 a month, roughly $30. Never even mind annual and ultimate tier packages, which are even more expensive, whereas Paramount Plus, a subscription to them can cost you as little as $8.99 to $12.99, and their annual subscription cost is substantially less than what you have to pay for DAZN. So it's boxing that you can afford. But not just boxing, there's also the UFC stuff, if you're into that. And of course, Paramount Plus, we all know, hosts a vast library of movies and TV shows. And this is where Zuffa has made its home. All in all, at the start of the calendar year, I would say that they're already off to a good start, though it's not being reported that way by the boxing scribes and the content creators, that Zuffa greatly stands to benefit from the relative instability we're seeing in different sectors. Fight dates, baby. You know, a lot of the conversations we have about the sport are all nuanced, focusing on the bells and whistles and the prestige, pound for pound, and the belts, the big purses, and the exotic locations, but the fighters that stand to benefit from that only represent a small percentage of overall boxers. There is an entire ocean out there of fighters that need to be serviced, that perhaps normally would have been fighting on the undercard of a Top Rank show against one of their boys or the PBC. They ain't got no work for those guys. No TV money. But guess who does? And when we talk about this sport, it sort of exists in a 2-dimensional space, only focusing on a small group of fighters that are making all the money. When you see all the critiques levied against Dana White and the way that he likes to do business, how the UFC brand itself is what gets all the brand deals, not the individual fighters. Those who think that's not fair. Yeah. And those who are afraid that he's going to bring that way of doing business to boxing, saying that boxers shouldn't sign to Zuffa. And buddy, Most boxers don't have brand deals and a bunch of patches on their trunks. All these other arms of revenue that you're scared he's gonna steal from them, they don't even have. So if the argument has been, Dana's only gonna let you make but so much money, many of these boxers only make but so much money. This could be a viable alternative that provides regularity, stability for a lot of fighters, and yet there's been so much pushback against it. This alternative to the norm. But look at what the norm has produced. Look at what the norm yields. All the major broadcasters, damn near all of them, are gone. If doing things the way they were doing things was so kooky crunchy, where did all the networks go? Where are all the fight dates? If every decision you made led you here, wouldn't that make those decisions the wrong ones? It's been, what, 2 years since PBC was jettisoned from Showtime? And I didn't see any major broadcaster in a hurry to pick them up. It's been months since Top Rank's deal with ESPN ended. Still no word about a new one. Compare that to the short amount of time that Dana White was able to find a home for his UFC and find a home for Zuffa. Paramount wanted to invest in Dana and his vision. Why didn't they want to invest in the other guys? Do I need to say the quiet part out loud? It's because there's something wrong with the way the other guys do business. There's something wrong with the way that business is done in boxing. In general, everybody's trying to make off like a bandit. The fighters are trying to make off like bandits against the promoter. The promoter's trying to make off like a bandit against the network, and the network that's providing all the money to make all of this happen. They don't get a return on their investment. So, why would they want to keep investing? Something needs to change. This might herald that change. In men's super lightweight news, on the heels of his big win over then-champion Subriel Matias, the World Boxing Council's president, Mauricio Suleiman, has reaffirmed that Alberto Puello is the mandatory challenger to Dalton Smith. Puello lost the World Boxing Council's 140-pound title to Subriel by a narrow decision back in July. Smith stopped Matias last week to claim the crown. And already I noticed the glaring inconsistencies in how the World Boxing Council governs their sanctioning body. So soon after Dalton wins the belt, you already want to bog him down with a mandatory, but why didn't you do that to Mario Barrios when he got his WBC title? Since becoming WBC champion, he hasn't satisfied a single mandatory. He was elevated to full champion in June of 2024, over a year ago. In that time, Souleymane Sissoko of France fought in the necessary eliminators to be ranked at number 1 at that time, but at no time did the WBC order a fight between Souleymane Sissoko and Mario Barrios. And bear in mind that Mario Barrios has been fighting, what's it been, 2 or 3 times since becoming champion? How come you don't pester him the way you pestered Dimitri Bivol after he won the WBC title? Or how you're pestering Dalton Smith now with a mandatory, a guy who's literally coming off a loss and hasn't had a rebound fight yet, where you let Mario Barrios defend his title voluntarily against Ryan Garcia. If you're getting the sense that I have a problem with the Puello fight, it's because I do. This guy's coming off a loss, hasn't rebounded yet, to where he should not be Dalton Smith's problem by proxy. And in my opinion, he presents a pesky enough base style that unfortunately Dalton could lose. He's not going to stand in front of him and try to mow him down like Subriel did. Alberto Puello is a mover, is a jabber, is a boxer, presenting a peskier base style that's harder to deal with. For those of you who saw Dalton Smith's fight with Matthew Germain, what was another moving target, another mover, another jabber, he didn't look too good in that fight. Now I'm worried that he may not look good in this one. I think the worst thing that could happen for the division is Alberto Puello winning that title back. When he had it, nobody gave a fuck. Nobody gave a shit. But he lost it. He did lose it to Subriel Matias. So how is he now Dalton Smith's problem when he's still coming off of that loss? It doesn't make any sense. The only sense it makes is that the WBC picks and chooses which mandatories they want to order and which ones they don't, for reasons that are all their own. Though not to the betterment of a division and not to the betterment of the sport. The sport is not made better that you protected Mario Barrios while letting him have his pick of the litter, letting him defend the belt against voluntary after voluntary. We're about to do that again now. So that you can jump down Dalton Smith's throat just a few days after he became a champion with a mandatory. What a crock of shit.
Look, I think Paulie just mentioned that being in Australia, he's heard about Spence maybe versus Tszyu, which I actually heard that too last night.
Mm.
I heard that too, so that's a possibility. I wouldn't honestly, I not right now, unless Spence goes out and destroys Tszyu, then it'll make sense. Right now, at this point, the way Spence has looked, and he's been out for so long, and he's had those problems, accidents, it wouldn't be that exciting for me right now. But if he goes out and looks sensational and destroys Tim Su, then yes, it'll make a lot of sense, especially in Texas, in Dallas. It would be huge. But right now, at this point, his next fight and our next fight would be nice, they're in Texas and everything, but I don't think it would give me that much of a great feeling because of what Spence has gone through in the last couple of years with his health, with his career as a boxer, everything that has happened. I wouldn't really be too excited about it.
At least somebody on Virgil Ortiz's team has some tact, has some integrity, that Robert Garcia is not chomping at the bit to make a Spence fight like Oscar De La Hoya or Rick Merrigan, likely because Robert wasn't just a trainer, he was a fighter himself. Champion. Knows damn good and well why somebody would be targeting Errol Spence Jr. at this point. It's an easy lick. It isn't right, and it isn't necessary. Where it gets interesting is Robert Garcia appears to have heard the exact same rumor that Paulie Malignaggi mentioned, that Errol Spence Jr. could be coming back against Tim Tszyu, which we talked about yesterday. If they were to put that fight together, I'm going to assume that it would be TGB, PBC, at the helm of that promotion, but they don't actually have anything on schedule right now. These are all just rumors and they should be treated as such, but at what point in the year would you put Spence in the ring with Tim? And on what platform? I want to say Amazon Prime, but I remember Boxing Insider Rick Glacier saying that this would be PBC's final year on Prime, that the deal ends this year. There is a lot left of the imagination there, but that it is a necessary step for Errol Spence Jr. before he fights somebody like Virgil. Fight Tim. It absolutely is, because if you can't handle Tim Tszyu, then you shouldn't be in the same ring as Virgil Ortiz. It stands to reason. I don't know who would be training Errol Spence Jr. for that assignment because he's separated from his career-long trainer, Derek James, who'd been with him since his days as an amateur. And we haven't even gotten a hint of who would be training Errol Spence Jr. moving forward. I think that's a pretty big detail. So, this rumor about Errol and Tim, it is getting around, but there is still so much left to the imagination that we shouldn't get carried away.
Look, that's if the fight doesn't happen, which it would be very disappointing for everybody. Myself, I want the fight to happen. The fight needs to happen, but for whatever the reason is, if it doesn't happen, I think we're gonna go out there for the best option out there. There's a lot of talk. Maybe Sebastian Fundora, who is the WBC champion, who might be committed to fighting Keith Thurman like he was last year, and the fight fell off, and they might have a contract signed where he might have to be forced to take that one. But if that's not the case, it was just a voluntary tower defense, so he could actually move on and fight something bigger and maybe fight his mandatory, which is Ortiz. That would be, I don't think it would be anything bad about, okay, maybe not fighting Boots this time, but we're going after the WBC champion. We're going after Sebastian Fundora. I think that's it. It still looks good for Virgil. I don't think it's going to be any negative things said about it because it's still a big fight.
I think the most that you could levy in terms of a negative against the Fundora fight would have to be the timing of the fight. That you only up and decide to hit the gas on the Fundora fight when you're under pressure to fight Boots. That you had over a year to go after that guy. You've been interim champion since August of 2024. Why didn't you hit the gas then? In that time, you allowed him to fight Cordell Booker. You allowed him to fight Tim Tszyu for a second time, and you would have allowed him to fight Keith Thurman last year if the fight wouldn't have got postponed. So why all of a sudden is this important? Because DAZN is pressuring you to fight Boots and you don't want to do that? Let's make one thing abundantly clear. When two fighters want to fight each other, they tend to fight. That's how it goes. But Virgil seems quite comfortable letting everybody do all his thinking and all his talking for him, which to me communicates that he really doesn't want the Boots fight, because if he did, he'd speak up.
He's not a little kid. That guy's coming up on 30.
So if there were anything negative that you could say about the Fundora fight, it's that it looks like you're using him as a shield to shield you from the Boots fight. Myself,
I never thought Boots was gonna be next, so it's not a sore spot for me.
I don't mind the Fundora fight. I believe that aesthetically, it can be a very, very entertaining fight given Sebastian's unique physical dimensions, that he towers over everybody in this division. Be a real David and Goliath situation. Virgil Ortiz trying to close the distance on the naturally taller Sebastian Fundora as he moves and jabs and tries to keep distance. It could be a very good fight to watch.
Sebastian doesn't give up his height as easily as he used to trade punches in the pocket. The last 2 or 3 fights, there's been a change in him to use his natural gifts, his height and his length. Stay behind the jab, move those feet, don't hold them.
So he was able to beat Tszyu more comprehensively in the second fight than he did in the first, without taking all that damage. So things between him and Virgil, who is also shorter, could get interesting. I choose to see the silver lining in all of this, that maybe we're not getting the Boots fight, but I never thought we were going to get it next anyway, and the Fundora fight isn't a bad fight.
It's a credible opponent. It's a reigning world champion.
Virgil would be finally fighting for a full title. That's the silver lining. But if there were anything negative that could be said about that fight, it's the timing of it.
That's it.
That you had a whole year and a half to fight this guy, and you wait up until they pressure you to fight Boots to make him a priority. It just looks like you think he's more beatable, so you'd rather fight him.
Before that, you wanted to fight Spence. So what does that say?
But if they make it, I'll take it. Robert mentioned that Sebastian might be committed to rescheduling that Thurman fight, which we've talked about, but I maintain that there's no money in that Thurman fight. If you're talking about billing that as a main event, a pay-per-view, nobody's gonna buy it. You stand a better chance of selling a Virgil Ortiz fight. So maybe they walk away from that Thurman situation.
And it is in keeping with what Oscar De La Hoya said 2 days ago, that he's made amends with Al Heyman, and they want to do a bunch of fights together. This is a fight they could do together.
We already know they're doing Garcia versus Barrios and Benavidez versus Zurdo. This could be another one.